Welcome back, everybody, to the fifth episode now of the Lawrence Harvey Cyber Sit Down podcast. A little bit of a different backdrop today. I'm in Lawrence Harvey's U.S. headquarters office in New York City. You can see One World Trade Center back there. So a little bit of a different setup, but all is well. As always, tune in the first Tuesday here of every month. This is our June episode throughout all of 2023 to talk about important trends in cybersecurity, the job market, and beyond. As always, I am Alex Warren. I'm your host, principal recruiter here at Lawrence Harvey across the cybersecurity business for North America. I'm joined here today by Brent, the CISO over at AFNI. Really great to have you, Brent. We've known each other for a while, obviously, and was really excited to have you on. Kind of general topics for today's episode, aside from just general kind of updates on the market and everything, is the route to security leadership, the route of the CISO. Brent definitely has kind of a unique background, I think, coming from more of the vendor space, and we'll give some kind of context into maybe some differences there or some similarities. So yeah, really glad to have you on, Brent. Why don't you give a brief run through of just kind of your history and your background and certainly kind of what you're currently doing.
Sure, by all means. Yeah, so my name is Brent Deterding. I'm a CISO, AFNI, about 10,000 employees. Team of 22, report to the CEO, cool stuff. This is my first CISO role. I spent 19 years on the vendor side, 15 years in operations, 4 years in sales. So I'm the only one I know who came from vendor side to be a CISO, let alone sales guy to CISO. Like, that's way different and new. It's kind of funny. I went from like evil sales guy on Friday to like trusted thought leader on Monday. So it was a bit of a thing, but I love what I do. Like, my stress has never been lower. My satisfaction never been higher. It's awesome.
Good. Yeah, I love to hear it. Really excited to kind of dive in on what that journey's looked like, and certainly just kind of your view from 30,000 feet right now. Really excited for the episode. Like I said, we'll kind of dive into some current kind of general trends and everything. But yeah, Brett, I mean, just to start us off, I guess, what was that transition like from the full-on vendor side of the house to now a fully focused internal security leadership position? What did that look like for you? And do you think the mission changes very much for those kind of two options?
Man, there's a couple things here. One is that I had lead in my title for 19 years, right? Whether I was in technical and operations or in sales, I was global solution lead, right? Overlaying the whole SEs, sellers, whole 9 yards, tech lead, device man, like all this lead stuff. So part of my identity was a technical practitioner, right? And when I first said, hey, you know what, I think I want to go be a CISO, one of the first lessons I had to learn was I had to quit telling other people that I was technical. And then what I figured out is that I had to quit telling myself I was technical. And that was part of my identity for like 20 years, right? So that was a shift. That was a big shift, because what got me to this point won't get me to my next point, right? And I have friends that are like, well, how do you maintain your technical chops? I'm like, I don't, like, at all. That isn't me. But I personally, I found that transition just fine. Like, I enjoyed it. I embraced it. It was fun with me. Not all CISOs do, right? A common refrain amongst CISOs is, I'm a recovering engineer, right? I had no issue with that. I was good to go.
Sure.
And it's not that I don't like that, because I did. It was very, very satisfying, but I get a lot of satisfaction out of what I do now. So this comes out in little ways, right? Like, I don't have access to any of my team's tools, period. And a few weeks ago, I asked one of my guys, I was like, hey, can you explain this to me? And he was like, didn't you do this for like 15 years? I'm like, ignore the man behind the curtain. Like, that was different Brent, right? Brent now doesn't have access. Like, Brent got the crowd, explain it to me, and we'll get along fine. So I enjoyed it. I acknowledge it's a thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, fair. When was the timing, I think, of you kind of realizing that maybe you wanted to be, you felt the need was there? What was kind of that light bulb moment, if there was even one?
Yeah, there kind of was, right? So in 2015, 16, somewhere there, I was like the cloud guy for secures. And cloud was still a new thing, right? And so as part of that, it was a little bit different sales cycle. Like we were talking to a
Yeah.
lot of CISOs, and I was talking, and I was like, man, I think I can do that job. Like,
Yeah.
I think so. But I lived in the big cornfield west of Chicago, and I was not driving downtown 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That was not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, whatever. And I had some other stuff going on. I'm a foster parent, adoptive parent. So my wife and I are. So we had some other stuff in life. So I wouldn't really pursue that. And then COVID happened, and everyone started working remote. And all of a sudden, I got the impression that like even execs could be remote. And I was like, uh-huh. And so I started looking into it, and realized that I didn't have the right lens. I had all the experience, I had all the opinions, I had all the wisdom, all the expertise, all that I needed. That was all fine. But the words I used were still those of a practitioner, right?
Sure.
A wise practitioner, I think, but still that. So I set out to get the right language, right? And for me, I took Dr. Eric Cole's CISO certification course, and that really gave me the words to better articulate all the opinions I already had, right?
Yeah.
I had hundreds of data points, what works, what doesn't, and catch the bad guys and cloud and all this kind of stuff. But I wasn't articulating them in quite the same way. With that, I started working on that, and then it took a while. I interviewed for a full-on year. A whole lot of different places before I found the right culture fit. And part of my lesson and wisdom was culture is everything for breakfast. Like culture. So I wanted to go to a place where I could succeed, and Acme was absolutely that place. And I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar conversation I've had on past shows about certain kind of areas of cybersecurity. For example, the language kind of aspect. There's a lot of people that, for example, transition out of the military, and there's different languages in the commercial sector versus that, and you need to be able to make that transition. And obviously, the CISO as a role is becoming more and more kind of overall business and risk focused. It's much more of a business leader than a technical security leader. So, like you said, being able to transition the way you're using language and getting your point across is really crucial. And for roles that we're recruiting for at a more senior level is always something that we look for and hiring managers are looking for. You mentioned that course was a great way that you kind of learned how to do that. Was there any other resources or any kind of specific examples of ways to get your point across that might differ?
That gave me now once I went through that, now that I have my position, now I look back and I'm like, there's a lot of people saying this, right? Not exactly, but the core thing is the focus is, as a practitioner, it was all about speeds and feeds, right? As a kind of lead sales dude thing, it was a lot about outcomes, right? As an executive, it's a lot about enabling the business, right? And that's what I was missing. I could talk outcomes all day, right? But talking about enabling the business, that turns you from just a guy who does this thing to an executive who happens to be a cyber guy, right? I happen to be a risk person. In fact, cyber is really kind of the third thing. Like I'm an executive, I'm a risk person, I'm a cyber person, right? And that implies a lot of stuff. But that means that like I can hold my own when we're talking about cyber insurance or talking about risks or physical security or marketing or business. Like I can be in a lot of different areas, even though like I'm the cyber guy, but like I'm more than that, right? And I think a lot of people are, if they embrace the enabling the business thing, because enabling the business, when you say that, other people recognize that. Other people say, that sounds like an executive. I'm going to say that. And then they start saying that. And that applies whether you're on the sales side, whether you're a CISO, whether you're an individual contributor, with whomever you say it to, other people will pick up on that and be like, damn, I like that guy. And it's good for you. It's good for the organization.
Yeah, especially in this kind of current market, obviously, budgets in theory are down and overall things are just tighter, right? So being able to really unlock what the business case is, what the value is there is important for security leaders, and understanding that if you're aspiring to those kind of positions is crucial. And like you said, even salesmen and vendors. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, big time. It's not only about talking financial or business. That happens, right? That's fine. But it's really about thinking like systemic risk. How well these things fit into the business? And yes, to some degree, like you've got to know your way around a P&L a little bit, right? You got to know some terms, you've got to know some things. And here's the great thing. If you don't know, go ask.
Yeah.
Because if my CFO came to me and was like, hey, can you explain to me how YubiKeys are a really good idea? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
But the same token, I can go to him and be like, can you explain this EBITDA thing to me? I don't like 100%. That's fine.
Sure.
We can help one another, right? That's not a problem at all. I certainly have areas of expertise. Other people do, but we're all driving towards enabling the business, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Like, I have no qualms about going to be like, yeah, I don't get that. Can you all explain it to me? Like, you've been doing this thing for 20 years. I've been doing it for 2 seconds. Like, can you explain it? I'm not a stupid guy. Like, I can pick up on stuff. I'll take notes. Don't get me wrong. But like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's a good mentality. I think you coming from the vendor side as well. I mean, maybe in theory, you would have more empathy for vendors now that are reaching out to you. What's your take on the current vendor space in cybersecurity overall? I mean, because from my perspective, especially with hiring maybe being a bit lower for like larger internal programs, I think a lot of companies are outsourcing a lot more services and maybe looking to vendors a little bit more. So certain parts of the market are maybe down and some are up. So yeah, what's your, I guess, view or take on the current kind of market for vendors?
That's a big question for me. I meet with a lot of vendors. I have a lot of opinions, and a big chunk of the relationship between vendors and CISOs is toxic.
Yeah,
okay? And that involves there are two aspects of that. There's some CISOs who need to be checked.
Yeah,
and there are darn sure some vendors who are absolutely god awful at reach out, right? Like,
sure.
Really bad, right? I spend a lot of time trying to help both because I think that there is a massive benefit to both. And one of the things that I appreciated is coming from the vendor side. I had data points on hundreds of organizations per year, right? For 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So I'm talking big, small, different verticals, different areas, different geos, different technology stacks, different all that.
Yeah.
That is a massive benefit when it comes to like what works, what doesn't, who did tell me about that, all that. So I want to leverage that as a CISO. I want to be like, so here's what I think. I think this for A, B, and C. And I want them to be able to be like, yeah, I agree, but you should consider D, E, and F too.
Sure.
Hey, all right. Then I get the benefit. So I don't Heisman vendors by any means. I talk to a lot of them. I love them. I also like helping vendors. I also like helping CISOs who, like, a lot of CISOs are like, no, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I'm not positive that we're missing out on a whole lot.
Fair.
Because there are enough of us who care and talk and all that. But there's a lot of bad out there, but there's an awful lot of good too. There are a lot of very, very good sellers. There are a lot of very, very good vendors.
Yeah.
And I have a lot that I don't personally buy, but that I recommend all the time. In fact, in my inbox right now, I had a CISO heard me at a conference, said, hey, can I get a demo from Yubico? And I was like, he's like, but I don't just want to go cold to the website. And I was like, yeah, I'll give you a warm handoff. That's fine.
Yeah, fair.
So I reached out to my seller. I was like, hey, here's the guy or gal over there. And I'm like, oh, hey, so I'll get him like this afternoon. Yeah. That happens all the time, right? Decent. I like doing that. Yeah. And I also like, by the way, I like events that are not 100% vendor focused so that I, as the CISO, feel like a piece of meat. I also like it when it's not too CISO focused and they tell the vendors to go sit on the corner with a bag over their head. Like, I like that. I like the confluence there. Yeah. C-Vision does an outstanding job. C-Vision events are phenomenal.
Awesome.
Just a couple of days ago at a Gensero event that was also really, really top notch. So, yeah, I like those. And you get, like, especially over a little bit of time, CISOs recognize those things and they are attracted to those events that do a very good job balancing vendors and CISOs.
Nice. Yeah, fair. What do you what do you look for when a vendor reaches out to you and kind of that initial outreach? One, and then what do you look for, when you first connect with them?
Yeah. So I have rules.
Yeah.
My rules are really, really tough. My rules are treat me like a human being,
Yeah.
don't lie to me, and don't waste my time.
Yeah. Well, that bar's too high,
Otherwise,
Brent, I think.
yeah, otherwise known as normal human interaction, right?
Yeah.
And what I do, I post on LinkedIn. I say, hey, vendors, here's how to reach me 2023. I give 45 minutes for my vendor meetings, which is a while, which is
Sure.
awesome. I
Yeah.
give icebreakers too. I'm like, hey, listen, I am an LCMS Lutheran. I'm a hunter. I love bourbon. I love NFL. I'm a foster parent. I'm an adopted parent. Like, what do you want to talk about? And we'll talk. And people are still like, well, yeah, but how do you form a relationship? I'm like, remember when you were 5 and in kindergarten? Do that again. Hey, I like your shoes.
Yeah.
Hey, I like your backpack. Like, that works, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we may or may not do business. That's a whole different discussion, but we can be civil to one another, for God's
Yeah.
sakes. So the bar is low to get in the door. Now, once you're in the door, then what I want to hear is I want to hear what you do, why you're different, and how you enable my business. Now, there are a couple different ways I can ask those questions, but that's kind of what it boils down to. I include that in LinkedIn post as well. Like, and if you come prepared with that, like, come on, man, that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I may not be a buyer, but I will tell other people what I think of you, right? Just I tell people what I think when it's positive. I don't so much when it's kind of negative. I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
I don't want to be. I'm not trying to throw anyone under a bus or anything.
Fair.
So,
Yeah, fair enough. For security people that are aspiring to be leaders, then I think the conversation of how do you strike a balance between vendor partnerships and building in-house capabilities? How do you look at that right now, and what are other colleagues of yours kind of saying, especially in the current market?
yeah. So there's some things that you can only do yourself, and there's some things that you can get other people to do for you well, right? I know how to change oil. I don't change my own oil, right? Because it's fairly simple and cheap for me to pay someone else to do it. And I don't really want to. So there are some things like that. Like, I'm not, if it's very specific to internal relations, we're going to own that process, right? We'll let the people own the process. That's fine, right? Because it gets stupid expensive to pay someone else to basically be your employee, right?
Yeah.
Now, in other cases, it's not terribly specific to my organization. So, like, catching bad guys, okay. Like, depending, right?
Sure.
I think most people should not try to do that themselves. Like 98% of organizations or something silly, right?
Sure.
Big chunk should not try to do that themselves. And I'm very willing to outsource some of that thing. But I've also been there and done that like a lot, right? So I can tell what's a good idea and what's not a good idea. And in general, like, there's some things on the border, but a lot of things are very like, no, we're doing this. Other people are going to do this. And, it also, like, it kind of boils down to kind of the cloud thing. Like, do you want to, are you focused on enabling call centers to serve clients? Or are you focused on, like, running a data center and knowing a lot about HVAC and data centers? Like, what's your business, and what gets you more towards that business, right? Again, every minute I spend, every dollar I spend ties back to enabling the business. Everything I do ties back to that.
Sure. Wonderful. I think that's all really good insight. Let's transition then into just kind of more background into what we're seeing in the industry overall. Obviously, you being a hiring leader for a long time, I think it's always useful to talk about just what do you look for in a candidate, both on a resume when first submitted to you, or in an interview. What are kind of some of the golden things that Brent looks for?
Yep. So not now, but in a previous life, right? At SkillWorks, over the years, I did hundreds of interviews. It was kind of fun because it wasn't always for me, but I was I guess some knew I was good at interviewing, so I used to help other areas of the business interview for their people, which is, sorry, my Alexa's going off.
Good.
So that was so I used to help other people interview, and a big deal to me was I always viewed, especially for entry level and even kind of middle, I cared way less about head knowledge
Yeah.
and way more about personality characteristics. And to
Yeah.
me, that boils down to coachability, grit, and resilience. And if you bring those things, I'm all about you, because I can cram knowledge in a reasonably intelligent
Mhm.
person's head in like 6
Yeah.
months. It's not a
Yeah.
problem. So, like, true story. I One of my very good friends is a pipe fitter, and I tried to
Mhm.
hire him into security a long time ago. Right? He has no interest. His son, though, I'm gonna get his son into security.
Yeah.
But I tried to get him because I was like, he gets it. He's gritty. He's coachable. He's resilient. He has
Yeah.
an inherent desire to serve, like inherent, like he's just a servant leader kind of guy. I'm
Yeah.
like, I want that guy. I know a lot of people who came from trucking, retail, welder, trades, chef. I mean, all sorts of stuff, and are doing fantastic in security. So I think it's really, 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 really about personality characteristics.
Yeah.
Second is, if I'm going to advise someone today on how to get into the industry, they need to spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. A lot of time on LinkedIn, building a network, asking questions, contributing, researching, reading, all of that, because this is not about certifications. This is way about relationships. And or even, I mean, so both from a CISO side, like, that's what I look for. From a candidate side, like, get involved, right? Because people are willing to mentor you, and people recognize perseverance, and they recognize grit and coachability and resilience. So emphasize those things. Read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. I mean, stuff like that. Like, just read, absorb. I'm convinced that if someone can get a job in cyber, if they want to, again, this is a great gig, but it's not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But if they want to get into this industry, then that is a very doable thing with not a ton of effort or a ton of cost.
Fair. Yeah, the coachability aspect's one that stuck with me. I think whether you're junior or even up through like a C-level leader, going out and seeking advice and seeking, continued education is so important. And when I'm screening candidates, that kind of motivation and those soft skills you mentioned, resilience, they'll shine through if you're really motivated about the work, right?
Big time.
And that motivation can shine through on other things, like a really active network and a LinkedIn profile and that kind of stuff. People want to work with people that want to work with them, right? So
100%.
those are kind of big things that stuck with me as well.
And you don't have to be, I'm aggressively extroverted, right?
Sure.
You don't have to be me. Like, get it out. Please don't be, right?
Yeah.
That's not a requirement. Like, you can be neurodivergent. You can be any shape, size, race, creed, color, anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. If you give a damn and you're coachable and have some perseverance aspect, some grit and some resilience, like, you can go way, way far, right?
Yeah.
And prime example, like, my right-hand man, it could not be more different than me, personality-wise, right? I mean, really, really different. And that makes us so much better. Like, when it comes to diversity and stuff, I care a lot about neurodiversity. Like, I want people who are different than me, because that makes us all better, right?
100%.
And big time. And that is so achievable. Really, if anyone is listening does not know Mike Miller on LinkedIn,
he's wonderful.
Fantastic to get people involved, right?
100%. Yeah, good call out. I had him on a former podcast last year. Definitely go give Mike a look. Are there any certain domains or skill sets in cybersecurity right now this year that you think are in more of a need than others potentially? Are there any areas you think will start to grow more than others? We would talk about artificial intelligence quite a bit on the podcast, data science and machine learning skills, but anything else that maybe comes to mind?
Yeah, you know what? If I were getting into cyber right now, I'd follow some advice that I took 20 some odd years ago. And come on, in 1999 or 2000, the body of knowledge in cyber was that big. It was like being a doctor in 1700, right? I mean, like, and I legit I could do intrusion analysis kind of stuff, right? I could do forensics, I could do audit, or I could do
Yeah.
firewalls, right?
Yeah.
All of the I have job offers in 3 or 4 of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what is the most widely applicable, and where can I be a badass? I
Yeah.
know, like, I took intrusion analysis from Marty Resch, who wrote Snort, right? Like, I wasn't him. That
Yeah.
I couldn't stand out in that environment, right? Audit bored me to tears.
Sure.
Forensic, I did not want to live in Washington D.C., and I wasn't a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
And firewalls, I was like, everyone needs a firewall. I can be good at that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So the equivalent now, I feel like the sexy thing is offensive security.
Yep.
I would not get into that.
Yeah.
Because I know that the high-end top people in that world are artists, and they are extremely good. And I know that there's a massive amount of stuff that very well may not be a thing in 5 years with generative AI and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe not. Don't know. I would get into, frankly, I think the lowest bar to entry and the highest reward is information security auditing.
Nice.
Auditing will give you a chance to expand, to learn a lot about a lot of different areas, and then decide where you want to specialize, right? Yeah. That is, especially with more and more regulation, we will have more GDPR stuff. GDPR in Europe will come here to the US, may come in the, I don't know what it's going to come in the form, but they're all 80% the damn same anyway. Yeah. Right. But being able to know that and being able to help guide. So first you start as like asking questions, gathering evidence, like you're a grunt, right? Then you get into the understanding the nuance of answers and trying to guide people through that a little bit. And ideally you get them with like a vendor where you get more exposure to a lot of people. I think there's a formal information security audit certification. Yep. A couple of years experience. And then you can go and, man, the world's your oyster. I mean, you can go do all sorts of stuff, man, depending on
100%.
That's what I would do, quite honestly. It's not necessarily like the coolest, sexiest thing ever, but it's kind of like if you run into someone and like, oh, I'm going to be a hacker for the FBI. You're like, all right. That's fine. I mean, that's like as credible as saying like, oh, I want to be a CISO. And you're like, you don't even know anything about security. Talk to me after you've been doing it 20 years. And,
get a foundation. Yeah,
like, come on, man. Like,
that's
like saying, that's like when you're took one accounting class. You're like, oh, I want to be a CFO. It's like, well, okay, but next, or like in 20 years, okay, cool. Next,
fair. Yeah, I mean, that's relatively in line with a decent amount of growth we're seeing as well, and just kind of the general like GRC space as well. There's a lot of new federal cybersecurity compliance frameworks coming out. CMMC. There was an event in DC last week. We're at the end of May. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was one I was going to mention as well. I think we've kind of given a good overall landscape of what it looks like to get a cyber job right now and the market overall. Do you have any questions for me, being on the recruiting side of the house, having kind of a wide view of the market?
So how again, this isn't a thing for me, but if I'm like getting into cybersecurity, I'm like, so you're saying certifications don't mean crap, like they don't matter, or kind of what's your like my view, and this is still old, but 20 years ago, I took a bunch of SANS certifications, and I took another one in 2018 or 17 or something, and like they were outstanding, really, really good, but damn, they're expensive, right? Yeah. I mean, but like, so if I were hiring someone, I would look on SANS Search pretty highly. I know they're expensive, but I would look on them pretty highly. What do you see? Like, do CISOs and other people, do they value certifications, or do they value the right certifications? Like, I can tell you, CISO speak, it's never meant squat to me.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a very big kind of philosophical question about how like useful they are. I think it's on a case-by-case basis, I think, for each hiring manager. Where we do see it asked for more and probably more valuable to the company is in professional services companies or even vendors that, as part of their like marketing and sales structure and bringing on new clients, guarantee that these people are certified and have those kind of backgrounds. And obviously that makes quite a bit of sense. So that's probably where you'll see it a bit more. For larger internal programs, if you're running a security engineering function, at the end of the day, and this is reality with most jobs, right? You're just looking for somebody that has the passion and is able to do the work or is able to ramp up quickly. If a certification can guarantee that, fair play. I mean, the golden standard, obviously, CISSP is a really long road in getting that, but it's almost like a college degree in some ways as well. Like it's not necessarily the education, the degree itself. It's the fact that you have proved that you can show up 4 years in a row and commit to something and have an accomplishment. Like that's a big kind of aspect, I think, to certifications is it does show a bit of commitment. As far as like specific ones that I think are good for entry level people, there's not really any that come to mind. I mean, if you're going into pen testing, it's the OSCP and incident handler certifications, GIAC. There's a ton of them. It's a certification soup. Google just came out with a new certification, which I've been hearing good things about, and I don't think it's too expensive. So as long as you're learning something with the certifications, that's the real value in it. I think from my perspective, I try not to let it be a barrier with candidates that I'm recruiting for, unless it is something really stringent with like a services company and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. On the vendor side, we once you were in the door, then we made sure that you got the GCIA certification. And because that was vitally important for us in the early 2000s, right? Sure. It was important from one, we needed that standard internally. It helped our sales and stuff too. Like, oh, we have the highest concentration GCIAs in the world, which we did by far. Yeah. Right. But yeah, like it personally, I would rather, like, if I'm hiring someone for entry level, I care zero about a degree. A good like SANS GSEC, Security Essentials cert plus the paper. I'd read the paper. Like that. That would tell me a lot, because like I think I can tell well enough when I interview someone if they're going to be reliable and show up and be a pain in my ass or not. Yeah. Right. And I darn sure don't need a 4-year degree to do that. And like the most technical person I know on the planet, the best security practitioner now, has a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. Fair. The second most doesn't have his associate's degree.
There you go.
And I still loved working with both of them. Yeah. Both of them make crazy, stupid money, and it's awesome. Doesn't matter at all to me. Some people do, some people don't.
100%. Everybody's route is different. Yours certainly was, right? So I think all the insight's wonderful. That's really all the kind of main questions for me. I appreciate all your insight. Final question we kind of ask everybody on the show, and I think definitely relevant to this episode. What's the worst sales or vendor reach out that you've gotten in the last years or since becoming a CISO, and maybe even what's the best? We'll give two sides of the same coin.
Okay, sure. I have a stupid number reached out to me asking if I want an exciting career as a SOC analyst. Hi.
Fair.
Did that a while ago, right? I'm not so much now.
Yeah.
And I suppose the best are ones that know a bit about me and try to find something that they think would be very, very interesting to me individually, right? That is very specific, or they came from a reference like, hey, I was talking to blah, and they mentioned you as being, this might be a good fit. Yeah. I did that for other CISOs that I know as well. If someone reaches out like, hey, looking for this job posting, whatever, I'm like, yeah, not me, but I know a guy. And it may or may not work out. I never know who's necessarily on the market or not, or passive or active or whatever else. But I really like being aware of what's going on and who's doing what and all that, because this is ultimately a small industry and business cards change, but the names kind of stay the same. So sometimes I'll know someone from a conference and I'll run into another conference and they're with a different company. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. But I know them, right? So
fair.
See, the ones that are very personalized by far resonate most.
Got it. Well, good to know. Wonderful insight. That again, that's it for me. Really appreciate the time, Brent, unless you've got another question. But yeah, I think as always, that about wraps up here. This, like I said, was the 5th episode of the Lawrence Harvey Cyber Sit Down podcast. Really excited for next month's interview, guest to be decided. Brent, really appreciate your time. Any questions for me or Brent, I'm sure can reach out to either of us on LinkedIn. I'm sure that's all good. But yeah, everybody, thanks for listening. And Brent, thanks again for the time.